Our News on Terror segment tonight, Iran said that their recent missile test was not intended to send a message to President Trump, but I think we know better. Trump certainly does. He tweeted, and I quote here, "Iran is playing with fire. They don't appreciate how kind President Obama was to them. Not me." And just last week, Trump's national security advisor, General Mike Flynn, made it clear to Iran, you are on notice. Joining me now to break all this down from the Washington Free Beacon, Adam Kredo. Adam, good to see you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Adam, I want to start out by having you clarify something because there's been conflicting reports here about the Iranian missile test. And I want to just ask very bluntly so our viewers know very clearly, did this missile test violate the nuclear deal? That's part one of the question. And or did it violate the UN Security Council resolution or not?
So it doesn't technically violate the JCPOA. That's the piece of paper agreement, but that agreement is just a parameter. The actual nuclear deal was codified under UN Security Resolution 2231. That does include a ban on the testing of ballistic missile technology, the transfer of some types of offensive weaponry. So in that sense, it does not violate that parameter agreement, which really just instilled the parameters for 2231, but it does itself violate 2231. So yeah, I understand it's a slightly confusing on that, but I think it's fair to say in the broadest terms that yes, a ballistic missile test is a violation or in defiance of that nuclear agreement.
Right. Now, Iran, of course, is trying to defend themselves by saying this was a cruise missile. It was a low-altitude missile. So that in and of itself, I believe the word cruise missile wasn't established in either of these two things, in the nuclear deal or in the Security Council resolution here. Does that argument hold any water?
No, I actually don't think it does because for one matter, Iran is researching ballistic missile technology. They will readily admit, their leaders and officials say routinely that we are testing ballistic missile technology, whether that's a cruise missile, whether that's a long-range ballistic missile, whether it's a short-range ballistic missile. All of that is technically in violation of the missile ban that's codified by the United Nations. So I don't think there's any way that the Iranians can say that this doesn't somehow violate the deal. They would say that it doesn't violate the JCPOA, just that piece of paper that the Obama administration and other world powers agreed to with Iran in Vienna 2 years ago.
Right, and I suppose they have less of an expectation of the United Nations levying any sanctions against them or any punishment or accountability than they would if it were directly in violation of the deal with the United States. Adam, I want to show this tweet on the screen. This is from President Trump. He was tweeting, he was sort of tweeting back and forth with an Iranian official, but this is what he said. He said, Iran is playing with fire. They don't appreciate how kind President Obama was to them, not me. So, of course, he's putting forth a face saying he's not going to deal with this. If there's any soft violations of this deal, he's going to hold them accountable. But Adam, today, Iran came out and said it would take only 7 minutes for a missile to reach Tel Aviv. I mean, is that directed at the United States, just using Israel as a threat? This is almost new territory.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And actually, the Iranians have said this multiple times before. They routinely put on their rockets in Farsi, death to Israel, Israel's an enemy, things of this nature. So, look, they're sending a very clear message. And yes, it is also a shot at the Trump administration because Israel is our closest ally in the Middle East. So it's pretty clear what they're saying there. But I think the Iranians need to be very careful. Under the Obama administration, things like this missile testing was not called a violation when Iran would ratchet up rhetoric in the region, talking about, like you mentioned, blowing up Tel Aviv or harassing other U.S. allies in the region. The Obama administration, State Department, made a real effort to bend over backwards. I can tell you I've spoken to senior officials in the White House, and there's no stomach for this anymore, quite simply. They've said to me that repercussions are coming beyond sanctions, and the gloves are off.
Right, and I think Iran is aware of that because one of their brigadier generals, actually from their Revolutionary Guard unit, he tweeted this in response to Trump. I want to show this too. He said, if we see the smallest misstep from the enemies, our roaring missiles will fall on their heads. Adam, in one sense, that's a threat, clearly. I mean, I don't think it can be interpreted any differently than that. But in another sense, it also sort of smacks of desperation to me. Like, they know it's coming. They know they're not just going to get sanctioned. They know the United States is not going to stand for this type of nonsense anymore.
Yeah, I think you're right, although I would say at the same time, as a close observer of the Farsi language media in Iran's own state-controlled media. Look, Iranian officials, military leaders saber rattle quite often, especially in terms of the U.S. I think it was much easier to get away with this rhetoric under the Obama administration. The State Department under Obama would routinely say, look, we don't respond to threats and rhetoric and saber rattling. We look at Iran's actions. I think this administration understands quite differently that for the Iranian regime, this is a real thing. They believe what they say. When they say they want to destroy Tel Aviv and kill every single Jew in the world, they mean that. So there is actually something behind their words, and we should be taking it more seriously. And I think the White House is appropriately doing so.
If we're looking at their actions around the world, too, and this I feel like President Obama purposely didn't look at their indirect influence on different things, but Iran funds the Houthi rebels. We know that for a fact. The Houthi rebels waged an attack against a Saudi naval vessel here, but, you know, reports were saying that this wasn't purposely aimed at the Saudi vessel, that this was purposely to rattle the United States. It was purposely to try to instigate something with U.S. Navy ships over there.
Yeah, absolutely. Iran has also been doing this to U.S. forces in the Persian Gulf in the region. They're routinely harassing, flying by, making overt aggressive gestures, trying to kind of test the waters. The Obama administration never really responded. You would see a statement from them saying, look, this is problematic. I think the Trump administration is not going to take that stance. I think the second that the Iranians really show an aggressive maneuver towards the U.S., they're going to get a real wake-up call over there. I think it's also worth pointing out that what we saw from the Trump administration in terms of sanctions, one, this is just a first step. Number two, if we look at who they sanctioned in there, it's an illicit procurement network, a missile procurement network tied to China. So we're really taking a look here at exposing Iran's network of terrorism. It's not just the Iranians in a bubble, it's China, it's all these other bad actors in the world. And I think the new administration recognizes this.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the critics, I think, or one of the critiques of these new sanctions by the Trump administration is that they're not very wide-ranging, that they're not going to have much impact or enough impact to influence those in charge of the nuclear weapons programs in Iran. What kind of impact? Is it just exposure, like you were saying, or will this have an impact on stopping their nuclear procurement?
Look, I have to agree. No, not really. This is more of a gesture, a warning. I think that's why officials are telling me this is just the start. I think this is a step to kind of expose what Iran is up to, this illicit network that kind of runs across the world. The Iranians have been exploiting that for quite some time. They have ties to North Korea. They have Hezbollah agents in Latin America. All of this is part of that Iranian terrorism puzzle that's taking place all the time on secret networks around the world. Also, I've heard from sources that these sanctions actually happen to be left over from the Obama administration. The Obama administration's Treasury Department wanted to move forward with these, but were actually blocked by the White House. So it was very easy for Trump as a first step to say, look, we already have this on the books. Let's go ahead and do it, and then plot further action.
Right, and that's what we've seen domestically and internationally, that the laws they've been on the books throughout the past 8 years. The Obama administration just chose not to enforce them. One more thing, I want to show this picture on the screen, lest anyone doubt that Iran is trying purposely to disrespect the United States or that the United States is bullying Iran. This picture is from an Iranian airport. It is a United States flag, Old Glory, laid on the floor as a welcome mat. They want their passengers to wipe their feet on the American flag as they walk through. Adam, last word here.
Look, this is more of that Iranian saber rattling. You would think they're from this type of exchange here with the flag, very juvenile, and I think they have acted very juvenile in recent years. The whining and the crying, but the administration under Obama bent over backwards. We're no longer going to do that under Trump. It's quite clear, and I think you're right what you said before. The Iranians look a little scared right now.
Right. Well, on that note, Adam, thanks so much for being here. It was great to talk to you.